so-called deep state, that supposed combination of government and secret services. So far, so entertaining, except Donald Trump and certainly some of his advisors appear to believe there is such a conspiracy in the deep state. And I'm joined now by the author of that novel, Jonathan Freedland, and from New York by the Trump-supporting commentator Ann Coulter. Jonathan Freedland, just lay out, who is the deep state conspiracy in your fiction, and how close to the reported reality is it?
The book is called To Kill the President, but it charts the dynamics between his chief of staff and his defense secretary. The president's unnamed. It's a novel. It's fiction. But these two men are good, loyal patriots who reach the reluctant and very glum conclusion when the president in the middle of the night unleashes a nuclear strike against North Korea, as it happens, even though this book was written long before any of these current events. They reach the conclusion that he poses a threat not only to America, but to the world. And as such, they wrestle with where their duty lies. Is it actually ultimately to remove this man who is posing such a mortal danger to the Republic and to the rest of humanity? And they reach, reluctantly, the conclusion that that's where their duty lies. And
so what would normally be the enemies of democracy become the heroes?
So it's an odd situation that arises where liberals and opponents of this president find themselves rooting for, not in the extreme situation depicted in my novel, but find themselves rooting for figures, unelected generals, intelligence chiefs. In the case that's ongoing, the FBI director, they're hoping that actually these characters, in the shadows normally, will somehow produce the goods that can remove from office a president they regard as a danger.
And is this your wishful thinking and that of other liberals?
As it happens, my own personal view is that no, if you have a democratically elected head of government, the way you remove that head of government is through other democratic leaders. I think people in Congress, elected congresspeople, Republicans in the House and Senate, should do their constitutional duty and impeach and remove this president, rather than relying on these undemocratic means. But the very fact, the fantasy which I'm channeling in this book, To Kill the President, exists is because there is such frustration that those elected office holders are not doing their duty.
Ann Coulter, do you think there's a real thing that is the deep state, and do you think there's a real conspiracy?
Well, I think the book sounds very realistic, other than the reluctantly part. The Democrats have been trying to impeach Trump since before he was sworn in and coming up with arguments for it. We know that intelligence services in the U.S. are leaking right and left. For example, recently, the conversations that the president had with the presidents of Mexico and Australia, even, members of the Obama administration are saying, whoa, this should not be done. I happen to like the content of the conversations, but that's not the kind of thing that ought to be leaked. We never really get anything good from our intelligence services. It would be one thing if, they predicted 9/11 or they saw anything coming ever. But our CIA is utterly useless. It's been stripped of powers. It's just a bunch of lawyers undermining political figures they don't like. And boy, are we seeing that with Trump. So I think they ought to just shut down the CIA and root them all out, hopefully with some prosecutions for the leakers.
But are these just sort of anti-Trump people in the establishment who are trying to slow him down? Or do you think there's a genuine conspiracy to remove him? Because that's the belief, it seems, of his former national security advisor.
Well, I don't think it's much of a conspiracy, if that's what it is. They're certainly not keeping it quiet. It's been written in nearly every magazine. Half of the Democrats. We have, Donald Trump's opponent in the presidential election, Hillary Clinton, has announced she's joined the resistance. I've never seen so many attacks on a president, but it doesn't seem to slow him down.
Jonathan Freedland, are these people the enemies of democracy or not? It's a bit confusing, isn't it?
It is confusing.
Has started supporting
I think their motivation is a democratic motivation. They want to preserve the democratic order which they feel is threatened.
Their democracy.
No, but it's a wholly unusual figure here. You have a president who doesn't observe the usual political conventions, even democratic liberal norms and the conventions that have held the peace and preserved the society. And these are very unusual leaks, and Ann Coulter's right that they didn't happen before. They didn't happen under George W. Bush either. You can't put a party label on them. These are people who feel this man is an unusual, direct, menace
Good people,
to the Republic.
in your view.
And they're good people who are very professional, whose loyalty is to the Constitution. America's not a monarchy. Their loyalty is to the country, not to the man. And people like Ann Coulter want them to swear some kind of loyalty to Tsar Donald. They don't. They have loyalty to the country and to the rest of the world in terms of the safety of the world, now imperiled by a man threatening nuclear confrontation.
Ann Coulter, these people are patriots.
I think that's a little hysterical. I mean, it's one thing to be quivering about Donald Trump as a fascist before he came into office. But since he's come into office, he tried to fulfill one of 2 or 3 of his major campaign promises with the temporary ban on immigration from certain terrorist-producing Muslim countries, quite a modified version of his more boisterous claims during the campaign. Court said no. And he said, OK, we'll appeal it. That is abiding by democratic methods.
But let's talk about today's crisis.
When he calls on...
which is North Korea. Let's talk about today's crisis, though. I mean, we appear to be on the brink.
But before we get to North Korea, let's not pretend that just because you don't like a guy's policies, he's not abiding by democratic norms. He is quite clearly abiding by democratic norms that, by the way, President Obama didn't abide by.
But we're on the brink of nuclear war, if you believe some people.
Oh, please. No, I think that's crazy.
So do you support him on North Korea?
North Korea can't even get a missile off the ground.
In which case, why is Donald Trump threatening them so egregiously? He seems to suggest they pose a mortal threat to the United States, and that's why he's upping the ante. People who know about nuclear strategy know that with this, you don't do bluff and bluster. This is not The Apprentice, where you talk about the finals and we're moving into the finals, a phrase that Donald Trump used yesterday. You speak carefully, you ratchet down, you do not increase the tension. And this is why people, generals, military people and others, who know the fragility, the delicacy with which you have to handle the nuclear situation are so fearful that they are resorting to, yes, pretty extreme methods by leaking these things out, hoping they can somehow put the brakes. It falls on those people who have the democratic power to restrain this president to use it, and so far they haven't.
And Coulter, what we're also seeing is the beginning of democratic attempts to stop the president having the power to use nuclear weapons preemptively.
I'm not really worried about Donald Trump using nuclear weapons preemptively. I think it's fantastic that President Kim Jong-un thinks he out trash talk Donald Trump. No, I think Trump is going to win that one. Again, North Korea can't even get a nuke off the ground. And part of what President Trump ran on was to end these endless, pointless wars. As for his policies, I prefer for him to get back to the things he ran on, which is ending these crippling trade deals and enforcing our immigration laws. But, trash talking the head of North Korea, the crazy dictator, no, that's actually kind of an advantage.
But just answer Jonathan's point, which is
we have a president so good at trash talk.
Well, but as Jonathan says, if you're really relaxed about North Korea because they can't even get a missile properly delivered, what is Donald Trump getting so worked up about? Why is he threatening a nuclear war?
Well, to the contrary, to Jonathan, I think what you want is for crazy dictators not to get their hands on nuclear reactors and, nuclear fuel, which, that's right, President Bill Clinton gave North Korea in 1994 in the Great Peace Deal, hailed as peace in our time, in return for no weapons inspections for 5 years. Of course, North Korea broke the agreement, instantly went to work manufacturing nukes. That does present a little bit of a problem. But sometimes I think, particularly here, I think it's useful to trash talk North Korea. And it doesn't take a lot of the president's time. It's better that he's trash-talking North Korea than his own attorney general.
Ann Coulter, thanks very much for joining us. Jonathan Friedland, truth stranger than fiction in this case.
It does seem like it. I mean, this was, as I say, written before these events, but events are making this fiction come true.
Thank you very much.
Do you believe that there is going to be a day where there's going to be a female in the White House as president? And how do you feel about that?
I wouldn't vote for her.
You would or wouldn't?
Would not.
You would not?
No.
Why not?
For many reasons.
Nice.
I've written an article about that in my former magazine. You'll have to find out my reasons there.
Yeah.
The magazine is The Objectivist.
Would you not vote for her because she was a woman, even if she were better qualified than any man?
If we had followed that law, I might.
That low? I think you have a very, very
I'll
low
tell you
opinion of
why.
women.
Let me answer this. It is not to a woman's personal interest to rule men. It puts her in a very unhappy position. I don't believe that any good woman would want that position.
So you are essentially against leadership positions for women, then?
No. Oh, no. A president is not the only leadership position. There are senators and congressmen and
And it's all right for you if they run and be elected?
Oh, certainly, and I vote for them. But, wait a moment, a commander-in-chief of the army, a woman, I think it's unspeakable.
My fellow Americans, the heartbreaking devastation and suffering caused by Hurricane Harvey has profoundly affected our entire nation. Many homes and communities have been destroyed, many lives have been upended, and tragically, some have lost their lives in this catastrophic storm. We pray for the victims and their families, and all of those who have been displaced from their homes. At this very moment, heroic efforts continue to keep safe those threatened by this natural disaster. I want to say a special word of thanks to our amazing first responders, our police and law enforcement officers, firefighters, Coast Guard, National Guard, EMS, doctors, nurses, hospital workers, and volunteers who have traveled from all across the country. Thousands of people have come together to prevent loss of life and ensure safety, and we are incredibly grateful for their courage, their professionalism, and their sacrifice. They are an inspiration to all of us. To the people affected by Hurricane Harvey, we are with you every single step of the way. We will help you recover. We will help you rebuild. We will support you today, tomorrow, and the day after. We have been working closely with local authorities, and I remain in close communication with Governor Abbott of Texas and Governor Edwards of Louisiana. At the request of Governor Abbott, I declared a major disaster in the state of Texas to ensure that federal aid is available for state and local recovery efforts. I also approved a disaster declaration for Louisiana. Organizations like the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and faith-based organizations are actively assisting on the ground, and they are doing a fantastic job. I want to recognize the millions of citizens across the country who are contributing in every way they can with their time, their resources, and their prayers. When one part of America hurts, we all hurt. When we see neighbors in need, we rush to their aid. We don't ask their names or where they're from. We help our fellow Americans every single time. This is the spirit of America. It's exactly what I saw while in Texas this week, a spirit of love, determination, and resolve. A spirit that even when wounded, never gives up, never gives in, never loses hope. We just keep fighting. We just keep pushing on for the people we love and for the nation we call home. All American hearts are with the people of Texas and Louisiana. We mourn and pray and struggle through the hardships together. We know that a long and difficult path lies ahead to get our neighbors back in their homes and on their feet. But we also know that we are stronger than the obstacles in our path. Arm in arm, we will strive, we will endure, and we will emerge stronger than ever before. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.